Good afternoon, Tim. How you doing?
I'm good, Shabbat. How are you? Good
I'm
afternoon.
well. Afternoon. I'm on the sort of the back end of recovering from a cold, so yeah, might be sounding a bit sort of bunged up and a little bit nasal today. Not my usual best on the microphone, but we're ploughing on nonetheless. So
I think I always sound a bit bunged up and nasal, but maybe that's just my paranoia.
Right, this week we're moving on from the conversations that we had around work, the Mexican fisherman, like can you make money from like following your life path? These were some of the themes that we've been touching upon in recent weeks, and you mentioned a conversation that you had with a client, which brought in this, archetype of the artist and the businessman, and we thought that might be quite a good podcast episode to unpack and dive into these two roles and how they relate and interact with the money path and the life path. So we're going down that route today. Do you want to sort of just tell the listeners what they might expect to take away if they stay till the end?
Yes. Well, it will depend on whether you listening to this, identifying more with the idea of yourself as some sort of artist, creative, idealist, or you're listening more as a practical business type side. What I hope you'll get is recognize that we all have both parts, that they need to be in different relationship, not necessarily 50-50. So you might come away with a sense of, oh, well, actually, I need to be a bit more this or a bit less that. And not necessarily 50-50. So what's right for you? And people will come away understanding what is the pitfall if I ignore the other side. So if I'm too much the artist and I disrespect or ignore the whole kind of business side, I might gain something, but I certainly lose something. And the opposite is also true.
Yeah. Okay. I like that idea that we've got both sides within us. I've got actually an interesting story of how my other side came out recently. I'll bring that up at some point.
Well, it immediately makes me think, which is your other side? Because as soon as someone says my other side, I'm hearing, well, which is the side they identify more with? So don't tell us the story, but when you say other side, which is the one you identify more with and which is the other one?
So typically, I think I just naturally identify with the businessman, right? Financial planner, running a practice, dealing with numbers, people's retirement. I mean, that's just very steeped in, I would say, business. But I'm slowly realizing that there is this artistic flair that's probably been suppressed and it likes to come out. And that there's just been a few instances in the last few weeks where it comes out and it comes out really well. And it really enlivens me and gives me a real lift. So it's very interesting that we're going down this route.
Yeah, that is a beautiful, maybe you can share actual examples. And I didn't know you were going to say that, but that's a beautiful kind of response to this idea. So I hope that other people, regardless of, again, where they position themselves on this continuum, will start to see that. Either that you already are bringing out the other side, or that you're not because you've been resisting or avoiding or dismissing it. And then you might see why it would be very valuable that you do. How do we begin? Shall I talk about the client conversation? And so I was talking today. He's a great guy. He's a friend. He's kind of a friend more than the client, but we've been talking about his work and, I sort of support him a bit in the background. He's in a very interesting sector, kind of large scale commercial property infrastructure development. So big projects. Company that's turning over hundreds of millions a year, not his company, but he's in a senior role there. But, he's a visionary. He's what I call a pioneer. He's very, very attuned to social environmental visions and very much now on his journey, understanding that the way to get big systems to engage with these kind of deeper, bigger global questions, we can't just do the same old stuff. We need to think differently, work differently, collaborate differently, tell different stories. So his artistry, and this is important to say, when I say art and artistry, I don't mean you're painting or making sculptures. You might be, or dancing or music, but it's more the part of you that kind of has a sensitivity, a sensibility, a vision, an ideal. Maybe it's kind of, there's some emotion in there. It's almost like there's something beautiful and wonderful and fascinating that you want to bring to the world. And for some people, that is a visual or musical art form. But for many of us, it's not. It's something behind our work, or a vision of a better society, or an entirely new way of doing financial advice, or could be anything. And he was saying to me, he was reflecting on his work, and he's very courageous, and it's really hard being a visionary in a clunky, big commercial system. It's really hard, right? So we were talking about that, and he was talking about how it is hard, and that it was great because he was of the artistic sensibility. He had a big vision, ideals. I think that's very valuable. A lot of the people I coach are like that, and they're figuring out, but how do I do that in a system that doesn't seem to understand and doesn't seem to value? And every time I've got some amazing idea, they ask me for the short-term ROI, return on investment, and I have to justify everything I do. It's sort of like an artist exploring a new way of painting with someone over their shoulder going, well, how's that going to sell a brilliant painting in 6 months? So, I don't know. I'm just exploring. So it's really hard. And he said to me, if I didn't have responsibilities, by which he means mortgage and children and bills, I would be 100% just with the artist stuff. I would explore, create, write, and I really wouldn't be with the kind of business commercial logic at all. And I said, well, I understand what you said, and many people would say it, but I don't think it's true, because as we know in the money work, whenever you say, oh, if I didn't have financial pressures, I'd do this, there's kind of a reason you're not doing it now that's not to do with money. And he laughed because he knows me well. And I said, well, often a lot gets wrapped up in our sense of responsibility or pressure or why we do what we do. And he said to me, well, what about you? Where would you be if you had a patron or won 10 million on the lottery or whatever? And I said, well, I'm at heart an artist, definitely. I've lived most of my life as an idealist and a romantic and a visionary. And the world for me is often a hard, painful, slightly brutal place. But I said, I realized some time ago, quite some years ago, that whether I liked it or not, it wasn't the right position for my growth, for my individuation, to just be in the artist role. Forget about money, but even without money, it was necessary for me to understand, connect with, and relate to the other side of the continuum, the business side. I said, and maybe this is useful for listeners, because listeners could be on both sides, right? So it's about how you see the other side. If you're very pragmatic and commercial, how do you see the idealistic, heart-centered side? And if you're very idealistic and artistic and creative, how do you see the clunky, numbers-focused, practical side? I said, I noticed years ago that when I saw on LinkedIn or in the world people who were maybe very commercial, very numbers-driven, very disciplined, maybe very good at sales, I had a very charged response. I judged them as superficial and greedy. I was also a bit jealous of them for their success. I resented their success because I thought, well, they're doing much better than me financially, even though my work's better. And I was kind of provoked by them. Now, anytime all that's going on, that tells me there's a projection. There's something in me that I'm not dealing with that they're expressing to me. Otherwise, I would have said, oh, well, good luck to them. Yeah, it's not my path, but good luck. But the fact that it had so much energy. So I said to my friend and client today, it has been useful for me to be 20% to take a step into that commercial world and 80% with the artist. And we had this really interesting conversation about the continuum and the pros and cons and what you learn and what you gain, and also what are the fears associated from both positions. And then started doing some writing and had a good chat with ChatGPT about the same set of ideas. So I'm very much with the archetype, as Jung would say, this kind of image of the artist and the business person, and how the rubber hits the road. What does it mean, not just for our money path, but for our life path? If we listen for our life path, we might be asked or invited or shoved to engage a bit more with the other side, even if we don't think it's useful or legitimate.
I feel like there's a lot to unpack and dive into there.
Sure.
some reflections when you were talking. I'm quite intrigued to find out what it is exactly that's like rubbing you up the wrong way or irking you when you see the businessman, and you said that that's something that you observed, because I've noticed since we've been doing our work that I get a little bit triggered when I see someone who's very now like numbers focused, and very kind of like driven by metrics and only metrics, and I feel like that's not the whole picture, and so that starts to sort of trigger me, and there is some resentment as well. So there's almost like the evangelical kind of money and life path work that we've been doing that's sort of seeping through, and I feel like this person's quite tunnel visioned, and they're only seeing, and maybe they're a bit soulless, I think is the sort of is the image, which is quite interesting to now reflect upon. And I think some jealousy as well, because it's like, oh my God. And I think success can be very surface driven as well. So we don't really know how successful
But even
someone
in your
is.
language, I can hear the ambivalence.
Yeah.
I can hear both sides. A quick response to that question.
Yeah.
I know you've got more. I would say it's been historical. So I'm no longer provoked by those people, genuinely.
Interesting.
I'm fine with them. And that's, in a way, that's been the result of me stepping 20% more into that world. And I'd say that's been going on for at least 10 years. I'm not like that. I'm not 100% or an 80% commercial person. But the journey from not even thinking about it, and then again, unconsciously evaluating, judging, rejecting, fearing, all of that, envying, to where I'm at now, which feels much more creative and healthy. So those people don't bother me or trouble me.
Yeah.
And as a result, I can learn from them. I can value them. I can take what I take, but still stay in touch with my ideals. And also, I can see what they're lacking, but in a much more kind of neutral way. So I can actually help people like that better because I'm not silently judging them. So I think there's a whole journey there, but it's not really present. It's not charged for me anymore like it used to be.
Yeah. And interestingly, is that what, when we've talked on the podcast before, why the artist kind of gets stuck, in terms of charging and being resourced, is because they're so kind of judgy and fixated on that side being the evil side kind of thing, or the corrupt side, and that keeps them stuck.
I think that's one of the reasons. Maybe should we dive a bit more into that side, and then we'll make sure we leave time for the other. You're right, Shabbar. On the podcast, we've talked quite a few times about one of the projections for people who are doing alternative or artistic or spiritual or creative things is they judge the commercial world as corrupt, dirty, greedy, causing lots of problems, and then they avoid it. And that sets up this charge thing. So they would be like, they wouldn't consciously say this, but I'm not like that. So I'm 100% with the artist, the idealist, the romantic. I avoid all that. And yes, then they suffer because often they don't monetize what they do. They don't make money. It's fine not to make money as long as you're not suffering. But many people do suffer from not making money. I think this is what I've realized today and why I wanted to have this conversation. That's one area of projection. So the people with money, the commercial people, are grubby, dirty, evil, corrupt, grabbers. Okay. I think there's more to it than that. We can investigate. So if you are listening and you identify yourself more with this side, which I have historically, here's some things we talked about today. You see, the thing about the artistic role is it's beautiful when it's conscious. It's great. It's wonderful. It's creative, visionary. But if I just stay, as Jung would say, one-sided, and I avoid the other, that can mask areas where I really do need to develop and I'm not yet willing to develop, right? So here are some of the things I noticed. Commercial people, or people who are good at sales or all of that stuff, they're really good at asking for what they want. As a shy, sensitive idealist, I was kind of hoping the world would one day wake up and notice me, and the phone would ring and people would say, Tim, we see you've been thinking such deep, beautiful thoughts in your office. Please come and share them with our company, right? That's nonsense. That's not artistry. That's childlike nonsense. And that's okay. We all have immature bits. So when I could step away from the negativity and you look at that commercial sales energy, and of course it's negative if it's all 100% or one-sided, but those people often are very good at asking for what they want. They're not neurotic about the value of their work. In fact, often their work isn't that great, but they're happy to charge. So they have a confidence, a clarity to ask for what they want. They're willing to experience rejection. They don't take things so personally. They sure ain't waiting just for the world to notice. They would just like roll up their sleeves. No, I'm going to go out there, and every day I'm going to tell the world, I'm going to make my LinkedIn content. So now I might find that very unromantic, and I might not like the way they do it, and I might not like, the content they put out. But if I can let go of that, these are people who know what they want, are not embarrassed to ask for it, have resilience, dedication, a certain confidence. And that was all stuff I needed to bring more into my consciousness. And I think that's true for a lot of alternatives in art. What do you think?
I think that's spot on. And identifying the positive qualities, I think really separates the judgment from the facts. Like the facts are that they're committed, they're persistent, they've got systems in place, they do all of that, they're not afraid to be visible. These are all good traits, and I reckon probably, I think when we start judging, and I've been reading a bit about shadow work, etc., and it's like, what we see in others that we're kind of lacking in ourselves, or we know that we've got, but we're not quite expressing, that's what triggers us. So, if I'm seeing in someone else their ability to position themselves and just be there relentlessly day after day, showing up, writing content, etc., when I see that and I see that I'm not doing that, that triggers me. And it's quite nice to be able to just say, actually, yeah, that person's doing things that I would like to do, and those are quite good qualities.
Yeah.
Doesn't have that kind of the judgy grubbiness that we were sort of talking about previously.
I think you're saying something very important and spot on. First, we have to notice we're activated. Then we have to work to see the judgment is if you like, a shadow or a projection. And then when we've done that, then it's very easy to just kind of neutrally and dispassionately think, actually, that's a useful quality to me. Yeah. It's very hard to do it all in one go. As long as I'm either activated or pretending it's not me or despising them or just caught up in that, it's actually very hard to see what is the valuable thing they might be doing, because there are a lot of these people. And I hope I'm saying this now without a lot of activation, because it's not there. I think a lot of them, they are in it for themselves. Their content isn't particularly profound. There's a lot I don't love about what they do, but I don't have to now throw the baby out with the bathwater. I don't have to reject everything, but I can still say, actually, it's not that great. It's not that exciting, but it's really good. They're showing up. They're not afraid of what people think. They're persistent. They know what they want. They value their work. They make offers. And that's all useful to me. So I think those skills are often useful ones for the sensitive, creative, idealistic, visionary in any field to develop for themselves.
Yeah. And it's become very true to me. It doesn't matter how good an artist you are. And it comes back to, well, if you're suffering, then you're not in a great position anyway. So it's almost like no matter how good an artist you are and how pure you are in terms of your intentions and this, if nobody knows your work exists, or if you're not able to put yourself out there, then if you do want your work or your artistic talent to be shown to the world, then you're going to have a bloody damn difficult job doing it if you can't embrace some of those qualities that the businessman has.
You will, and I still think we need to have a bit of nuance here. And this is why, for me, this is about our own individual life path, or what Jung calls individuation. So what do I mean? For me, I recognize, because I had experiences in dreams and relationships and my own kind of inner work, for me, it has been necessary as part of my own growth to step 20% towards that businessman vibe and understand what it is and integrate it. It's been necessary for me, right? Van Gogh, I don't know much about Van Gogh, but created amazing artworks and didn't really sell them, as far as I understand it, right? That's another archetype. It's not for me to say what his individuation path was. So there may be people, for me, the challenge was be an idealist and a visionary and have all of these kind of, I don't know, deep and meaningful things you want to express, and find a way to express them and get over that lack of confidence or that lack of discipline. That was part of my growth. There may be other people that's not the challenge for them. The challenge might be for them to truly keep the faith and just create and follow their creative flow and deal with the fear that no one might ever see it and they might struggle with money. And that can also be a path of individuation. That's about faith and trust and courage. So I think it's not like any position on the continuum is better or worse, but we need to realize that we need to, I would suggest, be as conscious as we can about where we are on that continuum between the artist and the business person, and listen, if you like, to what's required as we grow to be there.
I mean,
it won't be the same answer for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, I was just going back to like you mentioned Van Gogh and in his artistry abilities, but we don't know whether he was suffering, right? So I guess.
Well, I think he was. Didn't he kill himself?
Yeah, he cut off his ear.
And chop off his own ear, and so I'm imagining he suffered.
So he wasn't able to embrace maybe a side or part of the side that would allow his work to be visible and known in the world.
Again, I simply don't know enough about the times and the guy, and because in those I think a lot of artists and musicians had patrons. So I just don't. Yeah. Maybe I'll look it up and we'll talk about it next week. But what I would say is, for each of us, it's not about we need to be here, or here, but we need to maybe ask ourselves deeply, how do we relate to these archetypes? What do we fear or resist? What's the drawback of being in the position we are? And is, as part of our growth, a repositioning going to be healthy, even if it's challenging?
Yeah. I mean, I've got this idea because I don't really talk to many artists, as in, so people from that side. Yeah. And I guess I've got a very limited view of artists, painting and sculptures and things like that. And you're saying, but it's that more idealistic sort of freedom of expression and bringing things into the world, etc. I would automatically assume that, someone who is of that archetype is creating stuff in order to put out into the world.
Yeah, I think not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Many are. Many are. I think it differs. And I think in some ways it's more easy if your artistry is an obviously recognizable one. So if I'm a poet and I write poems, I can publish my poems. I don't expect to make much money, but my sending it out into the world is more obvious. If I'm a musician, I write songs, I record them, I put them on Bandcamp or SoundCloud or whatever it is these days, Spotify, and I get it out there, and I might make money, I probably won't. If my artistry is envisaging a whole new way this organization can do things, or a whole different way we could collaborate with children at a school, it's vastly more complex because I have to work with a conventional system to do it. And that's where I kind of get bruised, or, or I'm a financial advisor, but actually I have a vision for a totally different way of being a financial advisor. I would say it's still a creative act, but the steps towards creating it are a bit more complex and unknown and difficult. And that's where I might struggle with, how do I actually get it into the world?
No, fair point.
And I have worked with a lot of people like that. I wanted to say one thing and then I wanted to flip it. Well, yes, maybe the way to flip it is ask you to say more about what you said at the beginning. So it's nice in our relationship. I'm definitely coming more from the artist idealist who's had to learn as part of my maturation to embrace more a certain sort of pragmatic, realistic, commercial mindset. And I've tried to do that just enough to get the goodness from it, but never too much that I lose sight of, my heart, my creative practice. And of course, one makes mistakes either way, right? But that's what I'm trying to do. And maybe right now, 15, 20% feels just about right for me. It feels creative, actually. How about for you? Just share more about what you'd said, and then we can talk in general about that role and what those people have to learn from being more idealistic.
Yeah, it's funny because in my mind, this sort of the archetype is the businessman stroke technician. And I think that the thing that's missing within me is the flair of the artist.
Yeah.
And the ability of the artist to, and this is where maybe I'm sort of confusing, but the artist for me is someone who puts their stuff out there and is visible and is quite outgoing and willing to take a risk with their work, so to speak.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Because to me, that's more the commercial salesperson.
Yeah.
So that suggests that that's an important energy for you.
It is.
And at the moment, you're putting that onto the artist. So isn't that fascinating? Yeah.
And just as an expression of my artistic talent, I was asked to be an MC at my cousin's wedding last week, and that brought out a tremendous amount of artistic talent that I know is there because I've done it before. But when it doesn't come out, it really does energize me, bringing like comedy and humor and love and all these other sides that I don't really get to express on a day to day through my work. Well, I could do. I guess I'm just maybe sort of shutting myself off from doing it through my work. And that's just really interesting to see like how it changes me. And someone even came up to me afterwards, and this is, he was like, you could charge so much money for doing this sort of stuff. And I thought that was really interesting. He said, I think that you could charge at least 10 grand to do corporate speeches and entertainment.
Really interesting, isn't it?
Really interesting. And the funny thing is, if I look at him, he is the archetypal successful businessman who like started multiple businesses, successful, does, loads of things, is involved in many, really is the sort of, the archetype kind of entrepreneur. And he's coming to me and saying like, mate, you've got a really good business here if you wanted to go into it. So I thought that was quite amusing. But yeah, the ability to embrace that artistic side, I think, is important. I've noticed as I've got older, and I think we've spoken about this before, you start to embrace more of the other side that you shut off as you get older, because you've realized that the one side that you've been adopting kind of hasn't really worked or got you to where you want to be. And so naturally you kind of start to embrace.
Hopefully, not for everyone. I think you make a very interesting point. So Jung says kind of at midlife, which is not a chronological thing, but it's like when you reach the first half of your life, you realize, okay, this way of being has got me this. And that's when you open up to other ways. And if you're, I don't want to say lucky, if you're the sort of person who's either pushed into or driven towards growth and maturation and development, you will naturally encounter that other side. So I think that's why for me, in the last maybe 10 years or so, it's been a very healthy step to become a little bit more commercial. That's like another side for me. And maybe for you, you've naturally kind of been curious about this more playful, funny, light-hearted side. It doesn't happen to everybody, which is why we're doing this conversation, right? Some people become more and more entrenched in the way they are and more against the other side. So I think this links actually back to our conversation about getting old and old age and what's a healthy old age. A healthy old age is where I become more whole and I deliberately try and experience and embrace other ways of being that haven't been the ones I've identified with. An impoverished old age is I just double down on how I've been. And that's where you get bigotry, narrow-mindedness, conservatism, all of that stuff. I want to come back to the thing you said about art, because I think there's something really helpful here. In the artist archetype, there are many things. I'd earlier in the podcast talk more about idealism and vision and aspiration and romanticism. That's great. In there also is creativity, play, fun, exploration. They're related, but they're slightly different. So a true artist would be playing, exploring, doing sketches, trying shit out, seeing what happens. Yeah. It sounds to me there's something of that nature, what you might almost the artist as clown or as innocent or child that you really connect with when you do these things. It's not when you're giving a speech at a wedding that you're giving some visionary romantic thing. You're just having a right old laugh with people and having fun. Am I getting it?
Yeah, but I'm stringing together different parts and acknowledging different people and honoring, and it just feels like it's a performance.
Yeah. So you string together not just different parts, but like there's some of it's emotional and some of it's silly and some of it's serious.
Exactly, balancing. So
you're creating a work of art, which is
the
speech or something.
And I noticed, like, think about it for months and months.
Yeah.
And like ideas will come and jokes and little sketches will come into my head, and I'll write them down, and then I'll see how they land, and then I might test them on my wife and say, what about this? And then also, like in conversations, you'll have a conversation and that will spark something that you suddenly think, oh, that would be really funny as an anecdote for the family and stuff. Like, it's a very intense piece of work to do it justice and do it well, which is, I think, why I got such good feedback, because I don't think, I'm not sort of blowing my own trumpet, but that I've seen a lot of weddings and a lot of MCs who do these, and they're really quite drab. And I used AI imagery and manufactured some photos and stuff like that, and brought all of that in, which made it really lighthearted and fun. But weaving it all together is a work of art.
Yes, it is a work of art. So I just want to reflect back and use that to get other people who are listening to this, who are more at the business end, to think about what this might mean to them. First of all, there's a delight in you when you talk about not just the performance, but the weeks and months of creating it. Like, you're engaged in creating something, and there's a fun and a pleasure and a delight for you. So I would ask people who've got their system or who are doing whatever it is, their sales process, where for you is a sense that you are creating something new that you love and wakes you up and you want to talk about and think about. That's what the artist gets to do, right? So I could be very commercially successful with my sales system or product system and not be in touch with the fun you've just had creating that wedding speech. So that's part of the artist, is I'm creating something. I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know where it's going to end up. I'm pulling together this, that, and that. Oh, I saw that bit on the telly. I read that bit in a book. I had this idea on the toilet. Regardless of how the speech goes, that's really fun. So any of us could ask ourselves, how am I in touch with that? And if I asked you, you don't have to answer now. So that pleasure you get in pulling together something really integrated and a bit funny and different and serious and silly and personal, and if you use that in your own business or to create your business copy or content, would that change your social media voice? Would it change your website? Why is it when I think I'm doing business, suddenly I move from that very rich, multifaceted, quirky, funny, serious whole to like, this narrow, more soulless register? I'm not talking about you, but in general, that's what we do. Why do I think I have to talk in business in a certain voice? Whereas the artist, so yeah, I can see it looks like you're thinking there. What are you thinking?
Yeah, as soon as you mentioned that, I was like, it's almost like as soon as I open LinkedIn, I might morph into a different kind of a person.
Right. You go down the continuum and you become this person. And you don't have to.
Yeah, that is very interesting.
And not only do you do that, and many people listening will, what you leave behind is the very part that you've just told me was fun and you were brilliant at it, and some hard-nosed businessman told you you'd make thousands doing it and you love doing it anyway. But as soon as I think I'm running my business or making sales, I drop the artist. I drop that artistry. Why? But we do. And as soon as I think I'm an artist and doing something beautiful or playful, many of us drop the sort of disciplined, realistic commercial. Why? Why do we believe there isn't some great wedding dance these two can do together on a very interesting, beautiful dance on the dance floor?
That is a very interesting question. I mean, I would say that it's what we identify with.
Right.
It almost feels like business is serious, regimented, and I've got to show up a certain way because that's how I'm going to make my money.
Yeah. Who made that story up? Because it's there and many of us believe it or act as if it's true. Who made that one up? Another question, for anyone listening, who benefits from it being like that? And who loses, and what do we lose?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that who benefits. I mean, within a corporation, like obedient, structured worker bees, that's great
a little
for
bit like school.
Yeah, you don't want a load of people going around being too creative and too kind of, shall we say, artistic. Makes it difficult to manage.
I mean, that's a whole topic. Maybe another podcast. I know we're going to do a series on kind of wider social implications. I'm aware we're coming towards the end of time. So let me just name a couple of the artistic archetypes and how they might be useful for the serious structured business person. One you've articulated beautifully with your wedding example. That capacity to feel I'm creating something. I don't know what it will be. I don't know where it will go, but I'm pulling together things. I'm engaged. I'm creating a form. as well as a strong human drive that brings enjoyment and delight, sometimes we create bloody good things that we wouldn't have created through committees or protocols okay. So there's that. And there's also the kind of more idealistic, romantic side of the Arctic. What sort of world are we really trying to build here? Both of those can be very useful to the serious business person. The downside of being too much with the artistic archetype, if that's not my full path, is I avoid, yes, getting my ideas out into the world, or I fear rejection or misunderstanding so much I don't take that step. The downside, if I'm too much with the corporate commercial side, and a clue for that is I might secretly despise but also envy free artistic wacky types or hippies or soft and fluffy. If I notice I'm both a bit afraid of that world and a bit dismissive of it, that tells me there's something in that world that's probably good for me that I've not looked at yet. That's always the clue. You know, do these people activate me, both attract and repel me? Do I dismiss them? Am I challenged by them? Do I make jokes about them at training courses, right? If I do, there's probably something in that archetype that's good for me. And I have met many people who are, and we've talked about this, very successful with the numbers, but they feel their lives lack play, joy, soul, meaning. These are all the realm of the artist. So for those people, you might want to find a way to take a 10 or 20% step towards the art. Not 100%. You don't leave your job and start living on a commune painting, or you could, but you might take seriously kind of what does the artist give you and how to bring it in to your life. And a quick plug here, if anyone's listening to that and that sounds like them and they don't know how to do it, that's often the sort of coaching or work I will do with people who know either they do have a vision, but they're not doing it, or they're not sure what the vision is, but they know they're a bit straitjacketed and there's something much, much wider out there. You know, it can be done.
That's amazing. I think that's just so helpful for me in terms of how I approach my work and some of the blocks that I've probably faced, as many people do, that you're kind of hardwired a certain way and
Soft-wired.
Software.
Hardwired, we can be anything. Neuroplasticity, we can reprogram ourselves, we can retrain ourselves, but we run programs that we've picked up, and they're almost like computer viruses, if you want to use that metaphor. And then we think it's reality, but we're just running a distorted virus.
And the evidence, I think we always talk about looking for sort of counter examples. And I think an easy one as well is just to sometimes see, well, how are you playful with your kids? And sometimes you can go into role play and make believe and all of that sort of stuff. So you can access that stuff, you know, and it's how useful is that the side or those qualities in the other part of your life, you know, which you may have sort of shunned away, those playful artistic qualities. So I'm taking that away with me.
No, that's great. Let me build on that with one or two brief points and then we'll close, because again, you make a great point. Another sign that there's a bit of shadow or projection work to be done is exactly what you said. So I may dismiss and disparage the artistic, free, playful hippies, right? But then that part of me shows up privately or domestically or with kids. So it's like it shows up, but it only shows up in a certain part of my world. And then I'm absolutely certain it could never come into my professional public persona. That's also a sign that actually maybe it would be useful to be more integrated into my world. So often there's bits of us that show up in certain areas and it's like, well, I don't know how to bring that into my public professional persona. It's worth trying. And the other thing I wanted to say, as well as the example with your kids, is for you personally, your wedding story is amazing, because it's just such a good example about exactly what we're talking about, that whole creative, well-rounded, holistic, fun, serious, there's a whole artistic thing you created there. And coming back to the life path, you loved doing it. So even if the wedding had been cancelled, I'm guessing you would have still enjoyed the process, right?
Yeah.
So the actual doing of it gave you energy, excitement, which I bet is, you know, I'm imagining is more enthusiastic than you probably are about big chunks of your day-to-day work, right? So that's real data. It's saying that part of you is available and has energy and feels good. So why not bring it into work? And then you've got amazing feedback. So it's telling you that real people value it and think it's good. And then you even said yourself, I've been to a lot of wedding speeches and they're drab. Okay, well, fair enough. So there's really something that's already there and alive in your system. And the next step is, well, what would it be like to bring that more into your professional world? And it's another conversation, but why wouldn't you? Because that will bring up fears and judgments. Could be wonderful. Could be all the marketing you'll ever need.
Yeah. I think we're going to leave it there for today, Tim.
All right.
And I didn't know where this conversation was going to go, but we've gone down a really good route in terms of exploring these 2 archetypes. So I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope the listeners have too. See you next time.
The artist never knows where things are going to go.
That's it.
Part of their gift as well. All right. Enjoy.
See you next
Thanks,
time.
Shabba. See you next week.